Well, he hasn't done the countdown, so.
YouTube.
Oh.
Is this on the OTel channel?
Yeah.
Me. Should I just shut up?
So I launched a counter of 10 minutes. That's too much. Probably drop it.
No.
We still have this thing with the fucking OTel channel. It doesn't even like show up on the search.
Oh, it's at OTel official. OTel-official.
What's happening?
Oh, he's checking the OTel channel to make sure that it's queuing up on their live.
Oh, okay, okay.
Cool. Perfect. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
And I will launch the intro.
Hello, live from Salt Lake City. I'm Reese, and I'm here with some special guests. We are live at KubeCon North America 2024, and we're here to talk with a couple of really cool people in the OpenTelemetry community, just about how they got involved and kind of learn a little bit more about them. And let's go. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm really glad to be here. So for those of you who don't know, I am Hazel Weakly, and I have thoughts, lots of thoughts. They never stop thinking, and they never stop thinking. And I am super glad to be here and talk with you all and hopefully make you laugh so hard you cry a little bit.
Thank you.
And I'm Adriana Villela, and I work with Reese on the OTel end user SIG. So we're excited to be talking to our awesome OTel guests today.
So Hazel, how did you get involved in OpenTelemetry? Like, what is your story? How did you get involved? We can start at the beginning. How did you get involved in observability?
Observability. So I think I got involved with observability in a very similar way that a lot of people do, which is to say, I didn't. And what happened was I got really, really frustrated at things happening, and I needed to figure out how to actually ask better questions about my systems and figure out what was going on and dig into them. And the tools that I had weren't very good. And so I dug around looking for better tools, better ways to do things, and more importantly, better ways to teach other people what we're doing and how it works. Because one of my superpowers is being able to take the entire system and hold it into my head and be able to sort of intuitively think about it. Like when I was in an operating systems class in college, the point of the class was to kind of almost force you to learn how to use a debugger. But I never did, and I still don't know how to use a debugger because I just looked at the code and mentally traced the kernel in my head and debugged panic lots in the scheduler by just like staring at it. But I can't teach that to people, and I can't show them how to think about that. So I've always sat there and went, okay, I can figure this out with just, printf debugging or whatever I want to and vibes. But how do I actually, how do I take the vibes and turn it into a tool and an explanation and a technique and a way to teach people that you have this, you already know the answers, you know how to find things. You're already like 80 or 90% of the way there. It's not this magical new toolkit, it's this asking questions that are meaningful to you, getting those answers that are useful, and then doing something useful with that, like learning and then acting effectively on that. And you already do that. You already know how to do that. And just taking that and looking for really, really nice things ended up getting me into that observability space where I met a lot of people that were also trying to do that.
And how did you get into OpenTelemetry itself?
So OpenTelemetry, so for me, it was actually, I looked at the shape of all the different vendor-specific things or the different instrumentation of logging or metrics, and we didn't really have traces when I first looked, and it was actually really frustrating because I really, really hate doing things that are undifferentiated in a different way. I would much, much rather do a bit extra work to figure out like how can I swap things out, how can I think about this concept of optionality and putting everything together, because one of the best things about Linux is it turns out you don't need to write a whole kernel in order to get something working. You can use one. And one of the best things about Kubernetes is, sure, you write your own custom flavor on top, but it's the thin veneer over this core. And so for observability, I started looking for that core, the essence of it, that you could build that thin veneer, that layer on top. And I found that in OpenTelemetry.
That's amazing. So how long have you been using the project or, contributing or using the project?
So I've been using the project, actually, ironically, usually not directly, because I'm low enough on that platform size. What I'm almost always looking to do is enable people. And so I have looked at the OpenTelemetry collector a lot, of being able to say, how can I empower people, how can I enable them, how can I take them from these different places of maybe they're using one vendor here, and one vendor on another team, and one vendor on another team, or a third-party integration, or the OpenTelemetry actual code. And so as far as being able to enable people and think about that, I started, I want to say, really, really digging deep and building those platforms for other people around in 2019.
Okay, wow. So basically from the beginning, really.
Yeah, yeah. That's great.
Awesome.
Which is so weird because, like, 2019 was not that long ago. It was like 2 weeks ago.
I know, right? It does feel like it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was going to say, you're also like, heavily involved in the platform engineering space. And I feel like observability is one of those things, like we often talk about it as like a separate thing. But really, like, you can't have effective platform engineering without observability. You can't have effective SRE without observability. And I know you have many thoughts.
Yeah, so it's actually something that irks me a little bit a lot of the time, because I get why this happens. Because you have a massively wide platform, and you have a massively wide tool chain, and people keep adding more and more context into something, and the context goes deep, and it goes wide, and it goes up, and it goes in all the different places, and you can't possibly hold on your head unless, you're weird like me, and you can hold way too many things in your head. But you do end up in this situation where, OpenTelemetry, you can dive so deep into it, it can become your whole thing, it can become like the only thing you really think about, and as what you see in a lot of companies with the platform teams, they start off with a infrastructure team that's really just rebranded ops. And then they take the rebranded ops team, they split it into 2 or 3 teams, and then one of those teams ends up being in charge of the Kubernetes part. And that gets labeled the platform team for some reason. And then the platform team gets turned into 2 or 3 different teams, and then you keep going on, and someone gets stuck with the observability thing. And it ends up being really complex because there's a lot of moving parts. So I see how things get split out and bifurcated and sort of fractally fragmented, much in the same way as the CNCF landscape is so massive, everything has its own little kind of corner and nobody really talks to each other. But I wish people would do that, because they often end up re-implementing the same thing over and over. So like in the profiling side of things, we have this open profiling aspect, and they're looking at a lot of the OpenTelemetry stuff, and they're reinventing a lot of the same discussions that they need to have, a lot of the same, do we need standards, do we need naming conventions, do we need plugins, how does the collector of, and I'm like, we solved that 5 years ago, like, look at the pre-existing stuff, tweak it a bit, and then think about it. Or you have the event streaming architecture people, or you have database streaming, you have lakehouse people, and you have business analytics and business intelligence, and all these different data science types of things and data science related stuff. And it turns out that if you are trying to take a metric buttload of data and derive useful, actionable insights from it, and then share that with people who are doing data science. That's kind of what we decided to call it, 20 years ago. And then we forgot about that, and we reinvented OpenTelemetry instead of making a data pipeline. And then we reinvented profiling instead of making a data pipeline. And now we're kind of looking at all these things, and then we're going, oh, we should do this thing. And then the Power BI or the business analytics people in the corner are just crying a little bit because they've been doing this since the 80s. And then way over here on the financial side, did you know, this is one of my favorite things actually. So KDB is a financial analytics data database, and it is a columnar database. And so if you look at high frequency trading or data analytics people that are specialized in the financial world, they actually predate the usage of all of these, like, no queries that rely on indices. You can just grab the data and slice it. They've been doing that for 40 years because they had to, and nobody else ever really thought to look it up. And so it's fun to see all the communities reinvent things over and over, bring their own flavor and context into it, and then hopefully we can, with platform engineering, start stirring all the people together, talking to them, and getting them to actually look outside the little window and go, oh, we solved the same problem. Well, that's cool. How can I learn from how you approached it, and how can you learn from how I approached it, and can we build a kind of a more common thing that's like really awesome?
Given that there's so many, interesting points that you just brought up, and like the way your brain works and how you can look at something and kind of intuitively understand what's happening, what pieces of the project, OpenTelemetry project, are intriguing you?
So one of the things that's really intriguing to me about the OpenTelemetry project is, or rather, it's intriguing to me because I want more people to care about it. And that is actually, you have this dichotomy of OpenTelemetry as the end user kind of part of things, where you have this SDK and this API, and there's how you use it, and you have this mental model, and then you have the operational side of how you collect the data, how you store it, how you enrich it, how you sample it, how you do all these things. And they're all deeply disconnected. And they really don't need to be. But the reason they're often deeply disconnected is because they're all not intentionally or maliciously horrifically lying to each other. So the mental model, for example, that you have with traces is, there's like this little box. And there's the start of it and the end of it, and in the box I put all my information stuff, and I draw some information on the outside of it, and then in the information stuff I have another box, then I have another box, and I have another box. I have so many boxes. And when you actually use the SDK, when you actually send things, that's a complete lie. You're not doing a box, you are reinventing the concept of distributed transactions really badly and without transactional semantics, because you're just firing stuff off like a stream of events, but you don't have like this write-ahead lock or any of the other stuff that the database people invented in the 60s. And so there's that kind of lie of it. And then when you get into the operational side, increasingly it turns out sending everything is A, expensive, B, really, really time consuming, and C, actually a waste of effort and time and resources, and you shouldn't do that. So you need to take that, enrich it, correlate it with other data, look up other things, figure out associations, sample it, and sort of figure out and finesse how you understand the data in this very operational context, which is we often bundle that into the OpenTelemetry collector, but we never ever talk about the OpenTelemetry collector as like a required thing, or even a thing, and then so it hampers a lot of the potential of the SDK. Because, for example, you can't update the span, because the span is treated as a append-only immutable log. Except it's a box, but no, it's an append-only immutable log, it's a stream of events. But at the same time, it turns out if you break this at any point because networks are unreliable, you completely hose the entire concept of what you're doing, and it breaks all your ingestion pipelines, and it breaks the UI of everything, building everything, and it's super annoying. So I would love for people to think about what is it like if we made the concept of a collector, or this concept of enriching, rewriting the tree, flattening the tree, doing all these weird sorts of correlation concepts, or flattening or changing the shape of stuff to make it more malleable for you. What if that was a more integral part of how we design the SDK? And if we design the SDK with more use cases in mind, how do we do so in a way that gives people a simple mental model, but doesn't lie to them about what they can expect out of the platform? So like there are client-side SDKs, for example, that don't send the data at all ever until they have received on the client the ending span, which means that if your span is 10 seconds long, and on second 9.5, the client process gets shut down and does not have time to send that span, you lose all of that data. But if you send it all to the collector immediately, you have so much traffic, you can't really afford to do that. But if you were able to send like a snapshot thing of a write-ahead log of, this isn't done yet, but I'm gonna window it, like databases do in the 70s, then okay, you can work with it, and then you can patch it up. And some vendors have actually started to work cleverly around OTel and work cleverly around the specification in the middle part to allow that capability in places where they need it, like mobile clients. And then patch it up and make it, OTLP compliant by the time you send it to your backend. So if we open up the Pandora's box a little bit of, okay, maybe this is kind of necessary, maybe we need to think about this in a weird way of, we have to have all the things talk to each other. And we need to make it more possible to do these interesting things that make the mental model a bit more coherent. When can we do that?
That's a lot.
Yeah. Hazel's got thoughts. I wanted to just switch gears a little bit because before we started the stream, we were talking about, you have many thoughts on many things, and one of them was observability 3.0. Now we've heard observability 2.0 has kind of come into our vernacular lately, and you were talking now about observability 3.0. So can you tell us what you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is a really, really fun thing where it gets into the heart of what I like about observability, which is essentially the same thing that everybody ignores. And I would like them to not ignore that. And so if I brand it a little bit with like a cute little sticker, maybe people will care. So observability 1.0 and the 2.0 is sort of a reframing of the natural progression that has happened in observability and the vendors and the capabilities and the needs of the platform and what we need to do in order to ask the right questions. And before it was sort of, this is an observability and this is observability. And then we're like, well, no, it is all observability. It's all about asking questions. It's more, what's the fidelity of the questions? What type of questions can you ask? How much information is there? How rich is it? What are the properties of asking those types of questions? And then so, if we think of observability 2.0 as sort of being the ultimate inside the tech context of a company or a program or a platform, can we ask essentially a question? That's kind of the ultimate goal of observability 2.0 to me. So for me, observability 3.0 is defined by the idea that you need to take non-tech people and non-tech problems and the larger context of the business and embed it into your ability to reason about your system. And you need to take the system and embed that into the rest of the company so that the company can reason about that. So observability 3.0 has a stark difference in that it's not about tooling, it's not about capabilities, it's not about all the sort of the technical side. It's very much, now we need to take the tech and we need to take the people and the processes and this massive budget that the IT industry gets and stop spending it without accountability and stop spending it as this massive black hole where money goes in, magic stuff comes out and nobody can explain why. So can your business analysts, can your marketing people, can your sales people, can your products people, can your everybody else, your customer success team, can they all sit there and understand how to better serve the customer and how to better interoperate with the technology people without the technology people having to spoon feed it to them? Can you give them the capability to do a better job? And can you take what they know and take all this cool stuff that they do and put it into a context that lets platform engineers and product engineers and back-end and front-end and all these people do a really, really good thing of being able to present technological options and be able to actually interoperate with what the company needs as a potential, not just what the company has asked for, in a guessing manner. To me, Observability 3.0, to kind of sum it up, is the business context comes into tech, the tech context goes into the business, and they become one harmonious concept.
That's amazing, and I'm sure this is going to spark a lot of conversations, and I'm really excited to see, other people's thoughts and kind of hopefully, see your vision. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to chat with you, OpenTelemetry is an open source project. Obviously, we're at KubeCon, and you are at the Nevenly Foundation, and I would love to, have the audience learn more about kind of the story behind the foundation, because, she shared it earlier, and I would love for you to share that.
Yeah. So the Nevenly Foundation was started by Coach Nova, and it was one of those last things that she did before she passed away. And the Nevenly Foundation actually kind of started as an idea that germinated from Hackaderm, the Mastodon instance that we all built together, made into this massive thing, and then did a huge migration. It was live, we live streamed it, and everybody learned from it. It was awesome. And the reason in Hackaderm that we chose the technology that we did is because you had a bunch of brainiacs. You had a bunch of people that are kind of the world's experts at doing a lot of things, but we didn't want to rely on that because we wanted to experiment with the idea of what does it mean for a community to deeply own their own community, their own concept, their own architecture, their everything. And this was right around the time when the community, especially the tech community, was first, grappling with the idea of, we built this little thing and now it's kind of being taken away and we don't have control over our own, engagement platform, our own sort of communication. We've lost that. How do we never lose it again? And then it turns out that as the massive migration initially happened, we almost closed registrations on Hackaderm, not due to operational concerns, but due to a massive legal liability. In the course of how Federation works on Mastodon, it ends up being a very, very abusable vector for putting illegal content somewhere, because that content has to get syndicated onto your server. And so if you run a Mastodon instance, you are liable for anything that touches your computer. Oh. But you don't really necessarily control what that is. And so that is a very difficult concept. And so Nova kind of ran into this, and with her legal background and her legal brain, she was like, oh, absolutely not. Or, no. And then so she ended up immediately finding lawyers, sitting down, and building an LLC. And we've wrapped Hackaderm around an LLC, and very quietly spread this kind of information to a lot of other larger instances of, you need to now care about it. You have to immediately start caring about this, because you are at risk for a huge vector. There's a huge surge of potential hate coming. But it made us realize, as we sat down and we kind of solved this problem, when you go from a fun toy project, and you take this toy project, and it becomes a community, there's this invisible cliff of, I have my vision, I have my dream, my people, and now there's everything. I can't half-ass my licensing anymore. I can't half-ass my contributor, like CLA agreement. How do I get people from large tech companies or from regulated industries to be able to contribute? It turns out you can't just make the repository open source. You have to actually make it so that their paperwork on their end is okay with it. And then how about international people? How about people with disabilities? How about people with different needs? How about people with different that happens? Okay, well, we haven't even begun to solve the how do you afford open source? How do you fund open source? Nobody knows the answer. Nobody's even gone close. People are trying. Like Ava Black at CISA is doing a fantastic job trying to create this sort of top-down way and path and avenue for the ability for companies to pay open source and for governments to pay and for all these things to happen. It's going to take time. But as a community, we need to bottom up sort of figure out how do we pass this cliff. And it's a massive cliff and nobody really knows it's coming, and you don't have time to prepare for it because you don't get to choose when you become adopted and beloved by a community. Nobody sits down and says, we're a community now. You just look around one day and you go, these are my friends, and I love them, and this is great. And oh no. And then it turns out that's only step 2. Because it turns out that you can't really call the CNCF a community anymore. It's an ecosystem. And that's kind of that third massive cliff that very, very few people talk about. Where you have this one project and it's a community, and that's cool. And the community maybe grows other things. But when it reaches this threshold of becoming a generation and incubation hub of innovation, of experimentation, and it starts generating a fractal of different communities that all come together in this ecosystem and of this massive idea exchange of community knowledge sharing, community like growth. One becomes this messy, inarticulate, sort of ill-defined but beautifully growing organic thing that takes on its own life. That's an ecosystem. And we don't even really know how to build those. We definitely don't know how to fund them. We definitely don't even know the differences between all the legal and the compliance and how do you facilitate that? How do you get there? And so we looked at this problem, Nova and I and a bunch of other people, and we went, someone needs to start thinking about this. It's going to take a while. It's going to take several years, maybe even a decade or two, to really deeply help the world understand how to pass those cliffs and turn them into this growing ramp of taking ideas and sharing it with the world in a way that generates further ideas, in a way that becomes this ever-growing thing. And the Nivenly Foundation, which was originally sort of kind of started as like a legal cover and legal ability to do this, always was intended to be a vehicle that helps you understand that problem and helps figure out how do we make this beautiful growth and knowledge sharing possible.
That's so great. I think, are we coming up on time? So we are coming up on time.
We are going to have our next guest on. Thank you so much, Hazel. It was lovely to talk with her, and we will share socials like how you can get in touch with her at the end, and as well as like how you can get involved in the future Humans of OTel segment as well. And I'm really excited to see what kind of interactions come up with from these conversations that we just had. And yeah, whatever questions, comments, thoughts you have, definitely please let us know. We would love to hear them and help connect you with Hazel so we can learn even more and move forward to kind of her vision. And also secretly jealous of her mental superpowers. I'm going to have to see if I can pick up any tips. But now we have our next guest on, and I'm so excited. Hopefully you can see his cat pants because they're amazing. Ted.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
How's it going?
Going great. How you all doing today?
Not bad.
Yeah.
It's KubeCon.
Thank you.
Awesome
Yes.
times.
Yes,
Yep.
it
It's like
is.
a big friend reunion.
Day 2 of the main KubeCon event, which, everyone is on fumes at this point.
Yep, yep. Yeah, we had a busy start because we had observability day, which
Rejects.
Rejects,
Start with
yeah,
rejects,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then, observability today and KubeCon day 1 yesterday.
I know it just feels like we've just been here forever.
So we're so excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about, your role in OpenTelemetry? And, I'm sure a lot of our viewers who are more familiar with the project are already aware of who you are, but would love an introduction.
Yeah, sure. My name's Ted Young. I'm one of the co-founders of the project. And coming from the open tracing side of the family. People don't know OpenTelemetry is actually a merging of 2 prior projects, Open Tracing and Open Census. Open Census was mostly Google people and some Microsoft people, and Open Tracing was everybody else, and then we merged to form OpenTelemetry. And I continue to work on the project as a member of the governance committee, mostly just focusing on the various spec SIGs, implementation SIGs, that need that need an extra helping hand when it comes to finding consensus, figuring out what design is actually going to work. There's some areas in OTel where it's technically challenging enough that ironically it's easy to come to a design, or at any rate it's easy to determine which design is the correct one, right? Because it's so technically challenging that the requirements are very rigorous. But then there's like other parts of OpenTelemetry where it's like a little more squishy, where there's like one way that would be a really, really good way, and then there's some other ways that would like sort of work, right? You can't say they definitely would not work, right? But they're not like great. But when you have that situation, it's so much harder to find consensus, right? Because people will lock in to a particular idea. And then if it's possible to find some way to make it work, because they're engineers, they will continue to promote, but there's this way it could work. And trying to like find consensus there of being like, yes, okay, that would work, but this would work better, and getting everyone to be like, well, even though you prefer that one, would you agree that you're not going to convince everyone at this point to go that way? Like, yes. And would you be able to get everything done with this other one? And like, yes. And like, okay, well, then would you be willing to come on board with this and help us move this forward? Because we all actually like need it to get done. And so that's like a bit of just more like community organizing that requires maybe kind of like an engineering design background. And I feel like that's where I provide the most value these days to the project.
That's so awesome.
Yep.
Cool. So and there's I feel like there's also you have to like have some good diplomatic skills as well.
Building trust in the community is important. Just
absolutely
having people know that you don't have an agenda, right, and that you really are just there to like listen to everyone and help everyone really clarify the requirements, and help everyone really determine what the best design solution would be for those requirements. And
on a similar vein, it always brings me back to like the whole thing with OTel being such a lovely community, and that it really takes the whole thing of being vendor neutral very seriously. I mean, we're all at 3 different places, and we all get along. Like we're all competitors, but like not really, because we're all moving towards the same goal. And I was wondering if you could comment on like what has to go on to like really continue to foster that sense of community and not an us
trust.
Versus them. The trust.
That is great. So I really think there's 2 parts. The simple part is that like humans, generally speaking, are good people, and also even though we might all work at different companies now. The reality is, for the most part, there's just like many tech domains. There's like an observability scene, right?
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
like the engineers and product people, whatever, who's just like, that's their bag and they're good at it. And
Yeah.
they just tend to kind of like circle through the different orgs and companies that happen to be paying people to work on that stuff in that time. So I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that makes it easier, right? Like it's not like we're from different planets that are in some intergalactic war and we have like nothing in common or something. We've got all this stuff to overcome. It's just like we all know each other. When you're around long enough, it's like everyone cycled 2 or 3 jobs. So you
I
stop
know,
really
right?
looking at people as like representatives of a particular company.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah.
I think one of the things too, just from like my, very short experiences, even when they are moving companies, people want to stay involved in the project. Like they're
Yes.
actively seeking out roles where they can continue contributing to the project in their
Yes.
role. So I think that speaks volumes, honestly.
The fact that you can look at our maintainers and community members, and there's like quite a long lifespan.
Yeah.
At this point, I actually haven't run the math, but I would not be shocked if like the average age of a maintainer in OTel was measured in years
Yeah.
at this point. Like
could
on
see that.
average, it's like 2 or 3 years. I wouldn't be shocked if it's that high.
Yeah.
Like people really do stick around.
It's so true. So true.
And the second part of that is structuring the project, because companies, there are very few like evil companies, but there are a lot of bad incentives. So when we started the project, coming from other open source projects where I had borne witness and had to deal with all the fallout of these bad incentives or muddy incentives, causing various companies to like test the waters and like get into stuff with each other. So when we started this project, we had a goal based off of our experiences of like, how do we actually structure this project in a way that makes it obvious that these bad incentives are not present,
Yeah.
where people can look at that and be like, oh yeah, that won't work. So we're not going to bother to try to, we're not going to bother to see if we can just buy the whole TC, right? And
Yeah.
take over the project by like, what if just everyone who works who's in a leadership position works for Splunk or something,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like you can't do that because
Yeah.
once you get more than 2 people on the TC who work at one company, and you want a third person, well, one of those first 2 people has to drop out or,
Yeah.
or move companies or something.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the actual shape of the project, prior projects, even these big industry things like Kubernetes and whatever, they tend to have this like veneer of utopia. Like, oh, we're all just getting together for this altruistic reason of like making container scheduling work. And it is like, as an individual, it's somewhat altruistic in that like, I'm really interested in it. I would
Yeah.
love to like push this domain forwards. I want a real distributed operating system. I don't even want Kubernetes. I want the next thing.
Yeah.
But sorry, Kubernetes. I also want
Don't
the next.
come at us.
I also want the next OpenTelemetry. Like I want to
Sure.
keep pushing this stuff.
Yeah,
forwards.
exactly.
So I'm motivated, but like these are like billion-dollar projects almost, right? The amount of engineering effort that goes into Kubernetes over this, like if you calculate the salaries, that I'm sure that's at this point that's probably $1 billion. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe it's like 100 million. Yeah, I'm probably like way out on that one. Actually,
I can't math. I
but
mean,
it's,
with the
it's a lot,
Definitely
it's
a
a lot of
chunk of
money.
change. It's a chunk of change
It
for
is
sure.
a lot of money when you think about developer salaries and how many people work on these projects. OTel, on average, like monthly average number of contributors is like a couple hundred engineers, I think.
Wow.
On average, it's a couple hundred engineers pushing some kind of PR or something
Yeah,
at
yeah.
any given moment on OTel.
Yeah,
It's a lot
yeah.
of people, it's a lot of money.
It
And
is.
the only reason people are getting paid to do that is because there is some incentive.
Yeah. Which
So-
is so nice to have that, because otherwise, like, we're so busy already. Like,
Yeah.
so the fact that you have like all these like vendors who are backing OTel, I think speaks volumes for it, because I don't think
Yeah.
we'd be where we are without that, right?
But a problem Kubernetes had when it first started, and other projects that I've worked on, is it was there was all this interest and all this willingness to pay people to work on bootstrapping Kubernetes. But why?
Yeah.
That question was actually nebulous. For maybe some vendors or cloud providers, it was clear how they were going to make money and thus why they should be paying people to work on this. But for a lot of companies, a lot of groups getting started, especially the startups, it was not clear how they were going to make money off of Kubernetes. It was like step one, spend all this money to bootstrap this thing. Step two, figure out how to exploit it. And that, just leaving that door open, right? Just the fact that it wasn't really clearly defined how Kubernetes should be organized, how everyone's expected to make money, what part of this is going to be some shared open stack versus what part are we going to like sell things or whatever. That was all just like a big question mark in the early days. And should all the code live in a Kubernetes GitHub org? Or should various startups and companies be allowed to have complete ownership of some component that lives within Kubernetes, and thus it lives within that company's repo?
Right.
All things like this led to just like a lot of problematic stuff, right? Like, what if one company kind of owns a component of OpenTelemetry? Well, they're going to build a lot of like startup brand around that component naturally, right? That would be the natural play, would be to talk that component up and how it's kind of yours. Right? And then OTel as a project was like, that was a cool component, but now we're going in a different direction. So we should deprecate that one and get a new thing. Well, that would be like the kiss of death to that startup. Right?
For sure.
So you can start to see how like just leaving the door open starts to like create a situation where things like people's incentives can start to get at loggerheads. And working on containerization stuff that led to these situations where you'd be in spec meetings, right? People are making some technical proposal and everyone else is like, I can't tell if this is a good idea or not. This might be a good idea, or this might be the beginning of some sneaky play to like insert some nasty thing so that this company can pull some crap on the community later. And why are they doing that? Because they're evil? No, but because they need to make money off of all this money that they're spending. So when we started OTel, we felt it needed to be very, very, very clear how people were going to make money. And how this project was going to provide value for end users, for vendors, for cloud providers, for all the people who are going to be involved. That need to be crystal clear. Because otherwise we were going to end up in that situation. But because we learned our lessons, we did make it crystal clear. Right? All the code lives in OpenTelemetry. Do you want to donate something to OpenTelemetry? That's fabulous. You need to move it into OTel. You need to change the copyright and everything to be the OTel authors. You need to completely relinquish any individual ownership of this. It's now collectively owned by OTel and is now part of the CNCF. It's no longer part of your startup. And also, like, what's the boundary of the project? Telemetry. We're going to standardize the data being emitted by all of these systems, but storing and analyzing that data, that's never going to be part of OTel. Because you wouldn't want to standardize that part. You want to, that's like greenfield. That's the part where we're trying to figure out the futures. What can we do with this information? And we want everyone to compete on that, and that's also where everyone's going to make money.
Exactly.
And making that very, very clear really did a lot in the early days as far as bringing in the second and third wave of contributing companies, right? Like you have this first wave of people who are like, we're just making this major bet because it's super clear this will be good for us. And then this second wave of companies that are like, well, okay, if those guys are all in, that kind of changes the calculus for me. I guess we should get involved. And then once those groups get involved, there's like a third group. It's like, well, now that all of those people are involved, I guess that changes it for us. And the fact that it was super clear what you would get out of this if you put something into it made that happen faster.
So you mentioned, OpenTelemetry is the merging of like open census.
Open tracing and open census.
Thank you. I was like, open traces. Okay.
Day 3.
Is it? Okay. Sorry, y'all. And, which was focused on tracing and metrics respectively. And, obviously you guys did the project update yesterday. We heard a lot of new cool stuff coming on the pipeline. Did you was this part of your vision, like at the beginning of the foundation of OpenTelemetry, or is this kind of?
You mean like where the project is today? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've really, like our original mandate, we're at kind of this interesting spot in OpenTelemetry where we had this original mandate, which was to unify tracing metrics and logs. Those are the primary signals that we have available. But the problem in the past was these were siloed systems. And what you're trying to do is get a completely connected, coherent view of the system.
Yep.
And those were the three major signals that we wanted to tackle first. So that was like our original pitch. We're going to merge these three signals into one graph of data that can then be walked by a computer system, and we can dump all of this analysis off onto the computers instead of doing it in our brains when it comes to finding correlations across all of this information. And that was a great pitch. It's been part of actually transforming this whole industry, right? As the data completely changes, the products, of course, have to completely change. And if you're going from a bunch of siloed systems to like a unified platform, you can see how that's just going to create a complete sea change within the industry. Because, well, if that's the future, then what's going to happen? Well, all of these companies are going to consolidate, right? One company that was doing logging or whatever is going to acquire some companies that did the other signals, and then they're going to try to merge all of that into a platform. Or if they're a new company, they're right out of the gate, they're going to be like, are we a platform, or how do we fit into this new platform world where all the data is going into one spot? So that's like a complete industry shift that probably would have happened anyways without OTel, but OTel is like this massive accelerant.
So you incentivize basically the unification of the signals, not just supporting the three signals, but actually intertwining them so that you can really get the most out of observability, really.
Right, yeah, and I call, the old version of it, I call the three browser tabs of observability, because calling it three pillars gives it too much credit. Like there was some intentional structure there. That was like never an intentional design. It was like a terrible design. What should we do? We should silo all of the data and use our brains to try to figure out what connects to what. Like that's obviously dumb. So obviously we didn't design that. It just kind of accrued over time. And going from that to what I call the braid of data. So it is all this data, but it is being braided and connected in various ways. And you can think of the value that comes out of a braid, right? You can think of like the individual strands in a rope, and then you can think about a rope and how much more you can do with a rope than just pieces of straw.
It's just so much stronger, right?
Exactly.
And can you give folks just a high-level overview of what some of the updates that came out of the project update yesterday? So I would say the super high level, and we didn't really cover this in the update, but
exclusive.
But getting back to this industry sea change, right? Being at this moment where we're finally stabilizing tracing logs and metrics, right? We had the kind of last piece of that. There's a little bit of work that needs to be done related to resources. So if people don't know, resources are in a way like the fourth signal, right? Like when there's the data, there's the energy in the system, and there's like the structure of the system. And so the traces are kind of like the energy, right? That's the transactions, that's the stuff moving through the system. But then there's the actual like stuff that it's moving through, and those are the resources, the Kubernetes clusters, the virtual machines, the application binaries, all of that stuff. And when we started the project, there was this idea that came from OpenCensus that these resources were immutable compared to the lifespan of a service. When a service started, it was associated with some resources, and those resources did not change. And this kind of made sense. Because generally speaking, the resources you care about with server-side computing, they don't change. Now they do sometimes, but this is just like edge casey enough that at Google they kind of were just like, bah. Just going to ignore that. Like you can freeze a virtual machine, move it into a different data center, and then like turn it back on, right? And now all of its resources changed. It's the same computer program, and now it's running somewhere completely different. But in practice, we don't do that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you could just ignore this requirement. And this was very convenient because you have this obnoxious thing with resources where you want to figure all of them out before you start sending data. You don't want to start sending partially indexed data, which is what would happen if you started emitting telemetry before you figured out your Kubernetes pod ID or whatever. But figuring out some of these resources can take time.
Yeah.
You have to go query some API and like wait for the answer, and you don't want to delay the booting up of your application necessarily, because what if one of these calls is failing, right? Do you move forwards, or is this gating? Turns out there's a lot of pernicious problems around actually gathering all of these resources and associating them. And the biggest problem is devs, because it's annoying at startup, to be like, well, whatever, we'll do the dumb thing of we'll just tack these resources on as they come back from their various APIs. And then you end up with this situation where you have some partial data at the beginning. How do you prevent devs from making this mistake? Well, what if you made the resource API immutable, where you could only set it once? Then they would try to do this, right? They would try to come back with some late binding resource, and then the API would be like, oh, I can't. Oh, this is annoying. I guess I'm forced to do it the right way. So it's not that resources are immutable by some intrinsic nature of what resources are. Resources are immutable because that was a convenient way to force the Google devs to not make this like stupid mistake.
Oh, I
and
see.
to force them to do the extra effort of figuring out how to resolve all of these resources at the beginning.
So to protect them from themselves to a certain extent.
This is my claim. But then you get to clients, right? And all of this was fine. This was just like fine. All swans are black. And then you get to client development, which we've been a little slow to get to, in part because almost all the engineers came from kind of a server-side background. It was just a little bit late before the client-side people started showing up. But when they did, client-side computing is very different, right? When the application starts and stops is actually like pretty arbitrary. Like it's pretty arbitrary when you hit quit on your web browser or whatever. It doesn't really signify anything when the program boots or ends. But it goes through all these different states, right? Like it might be foregrounded or backgrounded. It might be on Wi-Fi or a cellular network, right? It might get put to sleep and then wake up in Hong Kong, you know. And so all of these resources are changing over the lifespan of this application. Oops.
Oops, indeed. Damn it.
So that's kind of where we're at with the project. Where we finished our original mandate, but there's like a couple of like squiggles around resources that are kind of like the last thing where it's like, all right, we have to do this really annoying work. This is going to be really annoying for me personally, because this is the exact kind of thing where it's like, we need to fix this to make it work for the clients. But we already told people it was immutable. So can we take that back and say like some of these are immutable and some of these are not? Like would that screw anybody up or not? Like this is going to be very tricky, and then we're going to have to come up with a solution, and there's going to be a bunch of community people be like, but we said it was immutable. And then we're like, but clients need to be immutable. We're like, but I don't care because I'm a Go developer, you know, like. So this is what I do. Is try to bring everyone together so we can move forward. But if we can get past that, now we are in the green field of the future, where we are looking at all of the data that we haven't captured yet. And we want to figure out how to start bringing that data in. How do we bring profiling in? How do we bring source code, commits, versioning, all of that in? Config files. That's the future.
That's exciting.
So we're at the 5, 6 year mark of the foundation. What do you think it's going to look like in another 5 years?
In another 5 years, Pretty much the same, but with more stuff tacked onto it. Sorry, I'm going to be very boring with that answer because I think we move slow, and I don't believe in 2.0s.
No, I'm all for
OpenTelemetry is
realistic
just 1.0
answers.
forever. And so I just think it'll be, but there will be like a sea change that happens. Once you get enough of this data actually connected, it unlocks certain things. So I don't think you're going to see OpenTelemetry radically change in the way it looks.
Yeah.
But 5 years out from now is enough time for the analysis tools to start to catch up with where the data is. So where I think you're going to see some amazing things is some amazing new analysis tools that are actually looking at all kinds of data that we can't look at today and are condensing that into like a helpful co-pilot for an operator trying to figure out their system.
That's exciting.
Right on. And before, we log off and get back into the real world, I have to learn about your pants. What is the story with these cat pants?
Because they're fabulous.
They have cats on them.
Do you know these cats?
Do I know them?
Are they your cats?
They are not my cats. I wish I had personally fabricated these pants, but I did not. The internet provided these pants. But I did know that these pants existed before I looked at them. I was like, I want pants that have kittens in space on them. And I knew the internet would give this to me. I had complete faith, and it took about 30 seconds.
Wow. Internet came through.
It came through. Yeah. They can make me get out of bed. They can't make me get out of my pajamas. That's kind of my attitude.
I love it.
All right.
Yeah.
What else would you like to share before we head back into the actual event that we're all here for?
I would just encourage anyone watching to, if you're an end user, please get involved in the developer experience SIG and give us feedback on your experience as an end user. In particular around installing the SDK and using the instrumentation APIs, because we want to clean all that up now that things are stabilizing. So yeah, please get involved if that's what you're interested in.
And speaking of end users, Adriana and myself work in the end user SIG. We do monthly events like OpenTelemetry in practice. We do end user interviews to learn more about your adoption, implementation process, and get some feedback so that we can share back with the SIGs. And we'll have a QR code at the end that you can scan to get in touch with us on the OTel SIG end user channel on CNCF Slack.
And don't forget the survey. That's open until the end of the week.
Oh, the doc survey.
The doc survey. It ends Friday.
Yes. If you've used OpenTelemetry.io docs in any way, shape, or form, and you have something to say about it, whether good or bad, or just comments or questions, definitely please take the survey. We will link that in the show notes. I believe we can do that. That is the thing we can do.
Yeah, and we should also, if you go to the OTel socials on, I think, every social platform, we're on Blue Sky, X, LinkedIn, and Mastodon. There should be some tweets also with links to the survey.
Yes. And we are available on CNCF Slack at any time. And yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And I think we're good.
Yay.